This is Garis, Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 646, entitled Masculism will make women dateable again. Description. One of the truly shocking stats to come out of the manosphere lately is that over 60% of young men in the US refuse to date women. This flyer explains why the rise of masculism will cause women to become more dateable again, by forcing women to become more biconscious, to lose their PC fairyland arrogance, taught to them by feminists that women are as capable as men. Masculine scientists show women that women cannot compete with men at the top end of the performance scale, thus making young women humbler and grateful to men for all that men do for society. As women lose their monoconscious feminazi bitchiness and become less arrogant by becoming biconscious, after having learnt some masculism, they'll be seen to be nicer by young men, who will then be more willing to date these women again. Well, the flyer itself. Masculism will make women dateable again, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Monoconscious feminism has made women so obnoxious as to be undateable. It's no surprise that in the US, for example, over 60% of young men between 18 and 30 not only refuse to marry and to give young women their sperm, in brackets, thus rejecting paternity, but they don't even date young women. Why is this? When asked, young men say that their dominant reason is that, quote, women are undateable. So what do these young men mean by that statement? Watching YouTube videos on this question reveals that the major reason young men refuse to date young women is because of these young women's feminist attitudes. That is, they are often hostile to men, angry at men, definitely not nice to be with for men. So millions of young men have simply wiped their hands of dating them, preferring to do other things that give them pleasure, or prefer to sex their lover bots, or indulge more in their hobbies, rather than have to put up with the misandrist, male-dumping attitudes of young women who have grown up with feminism, which has taught them all their young lives that, quote, men are rapists, men are toxic, men are the warmongers, men are the morally inferior sex, men just want you for sex, end quote, and the like. Things have got so bad that over 60% of young men now in the US have completely given up trying to date women. Part of the reason why young men have given up on women is due to women themselves and the impact of social media. Before the internet, women usually met men locally, so their choice of men to choose from was limited. But with the internet and dating sites, women have millions of men to choose from. With dating sites such as Tinder, which allows people to choose potential partners, in brackets, for relationships or for sex, based only on looks, allows young women to swipe right, that is select, on only a very small percentage of men, often less than 5%. So the less handsome, less sexually attractive young men are not selected. That is, they are black-pilled by young women. The top few percent of men get most of the women. Those women of average looks get to have sex with men who are well above these women's SMV, that's sexual marketplace value. Largely because the high SMV'd men are less particular with whom they have sex with, valuing the sex rather than the quality of the woman they have sex with. Once these average women have had a sexual experience with a top quality SMV man, that becomes their standard for the rest of their lives in many cases. So they become more picky after that experience, thus black-pilling young men all the more. So undoubtedly, a sizable fraction of the 60+% of young men who have wiped their hands of dating women are black-pilled men who would like to date women but are fed up with being constantly rejected by women, so have bowed out of the dating game. But that still leaves a sizable fraction of non-dating young men who have not been black-pilled. So why is this category of men not dating women? Largely due to their anti-feminist feelings, having grown tired of listening to feministed young women bitching on to them about the toxicity of men, etc. So have decided that they have had enough and decided to leave these bitchy feministed women rotting on the shelf. For these non-black-pilled young men, this flyer claims that the rise of masculism will force these young women to change their monoconscious feminist attitudes, which in turn will make them a lot nicer to be with for men. So that these women will become a lot more dateable. Just how will masculism make women more dateable? Today's feminists are almost universally monoconscious. That is, the only gender politics they have heard of is feminist. Feminism is a deeply misandrist, gynocentric ideology that preaches to women that gender oppression is a one-way street, that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. Monoconscious feminism is seen by masculists, biconscious masculists, who by definition have had both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, as being profoundly misandrist, since it says a lot about how men oppress women, but says nothing, in capital letters, about how women oppress men. Feminism nearly always takes the female point of view, thus making it gynocentric. Masculists, particularly biconscious masculists, see clearly that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, with women actually oppressing men far worse than vice versa, since many of women's gender crimes against men are horrible and last decades, thus making women's oppression of men a lot more serious than vice versa. To masculists, even rape, which is one of the worst ways that men oppress women, is seen as small beer in comparison with what the masculists call the big three, that is, the worst three ways that women oppress men, namely women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering, which if anyone of either sex examines these gender crimes, realizes what horrible crimes they are, and learns to hate these gender criminal women who commit these horrible gender crimes against men. Biconscious masculists are fed up with the misandry of monoconscious feminists, so are powerfully motivated to crush them when they come across these women. Monoconscious feminists are seen as hypocrites by biconscious masculists, arch-hypocrites, seen as being gender politically ignorant, knowing only half the gender political story, and hence are callous and often indifferent towards the way that women oppress men. Increasingly, biconscious masculists are exploding in rage against monoconscious feminists on campus, in private conversations, in public meetings, etc., to the point that young women are now starting to really take notice, becoming aware increasingly that there are a growing number of men out there who call themselves masculists, who verbally attack monoconscious feminists, treating them with real masculist hatred and anger due to the level of hypocrisy that these women show towards biconscious masculists. As a result of the growing number of such confrontations, women are learning that gender oppression is very much a two-way street, and that men, particularly biconscious masculisted men, will not tolerate a monoconscious feminist and will dump such a woman on the spot, even spitting in her face for her despised hypocritical monoconsciousness and callousness towards men. In a few years, it's likely that most young women, especially campus women, will have learned that to remain a monoconscious feminist is to face a serious chance of never getting a boyfriend, plus the likelihood that her female friends will think she is retarded and that her male friends will unfriend her. Soon, it will be seen by young women to be dangerous to be a monoconscious feminist. A bit later, it will be just part of the zeitgeist that nearly everyone is biconscious, and that monoconscious feminists are seen as a retrograde, dying breed. Another reason why so many young men refuse to date young women is due to the insufferable arrogance of young women. Part of the reason for this arrogance is young women's experience on the dating sites when they see hundreds of men seeking to connect with them. Such popularity goes to their heads, plus they listen to what the monoconscious feminists are telling them, that men are toxic, men are rapists, etc. So these young women, who have grown up with modern feminism all their young lives, believe that they, that is young women, are morally superior to men. Modern feminists are also brainwashing these young women that women are just as capable as men, so that too gives them confidence, which easily turns into arrogance. Then along comes masculism, which has no patience for feminist PC bullshit. For example, the idea that women are as capable as men. For sure, there's a considerable overlap between the sexes on performance score distributions, but not at the top end, nor at the bottom end, of performance scores. Masculist scientists have an easy time demolishing the egalitarian claims of the feminists by showing young women that, for example, women's brains are 10% smaller than men's, that women have lower average IQs than men by 4 IQ points, that women lack genius, there are no female Beethovens nor Einsteins, that women have won a pathetic 3% of science Nobel Prizes, that women have a 10% lower IQ variance than men, so that IQ scores are more bunched up over a whole population, whereas men's IQ scores are more spread out, so that the morons and the genii are men. Men have 20 times higher testosterone levels in their blood than women, so are much more aggressive, ambitious, dogged, persistent, so finish difficult tasks more readily than women, so achieve far more than women. Women don't build anything, invent anything, create anything, so men don't admire women, but have to be nice to women because men want to penis women, with the exception of monoconscious feminists, whom biconscious masculists despise and ignore to death, so are not constrained to be nice to them, since they do not want to penis them, thus forcing such women to rot on the shelf. Masculist theorists, masculist scientists, are in the process of teaching society, including young women, that in many ways women are inferior to men, especially when it comes to creating societies. The masculist ideas on male superiority based on scientific evidence is influencing young men and young women. Young women are thus losing their arrogance, and young men are being intellectually armed to attack the unjustified monoconscious feminist arrogance, crushing it vigorously so that young women become more humble, more likable, and more approachable by young men. As millions of young women become more biconscious, that is, by definition, have absorbed masculist ideas, they will lose their feminazi bitchiness and will be forced to by biconscious masculists, who will not tolerate their feminist monoconsciousness and will severely punish such women, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and utterly rejected both socially and sexually. Given all the above, it's likely that in the next few years, as masculist thinking spreads through the culture of the planet, that women, young women, will become a lot more biconscious and hence become a lot nicer as women, as human beings, and hence be a lot more approachable, more dateable by young men, so that hopefully by the end of this decade we will see the percentage of young men who refuse to date young women sizably reduce. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets, click on the Masculist tab for 640 plus Masculist essays and their videos. See also a London Reel interview on Masculism at AI will kill 1 billion people, do we create our exterminators? Professor Hugo de Garis, London Reel, in brackets. See the last half hour of this 2-hour interview for the Masculist segment. These flyers are available in text and video formats on Minds, BitChute, Odyssey, MGTOW.tv and X. Ciao.